Hello and welcome to This Is Us. I'm Becca King-Reed. This week we're at Moffett Field. Behind me you can see the famous Hangar 1. You've no doubt noticed it as you've passed by on Highway 101. It is so large you could fit 3 ships the size of the Titanic inside. It was built back in the 1930s for the USS Macon, an airship, and it could hold 2 blimps beside. We're at the Moffett Field Museum with the Community Relations Director for the museum, Greg Landers.
Hi,
Thanks
Becca.
for joining us, Greg.
Thank you.
Now we're in front of a really fascinating diorama, it shows the Macon. And the Macon in this appears to be, it looks sort of like a blimp, but it's not a blimp, is it?
It looks like a blimp, but this is a dirigible. And the difference is a blimp is like a balloon filled with steam or air or gases. A dirigible is a solid structure. It's got steel-like beams inside made out of aluminum, and then there's airbags within the dirigible to provide the lift.
And what was the mission for the Macon? What was it up to?
Reconnaissance. Go out over the oceans, look for the enemy steaming over the horizon to possibly attack the United States.
So looking for ships.
Looking for ships, exactly.
So why not use planes?
Well, planes are good because you can get higher altitude, but they can't fly that long. They have to come back and land. Ships are good because they can stay out at the ocean for quite a while, but they can't get too good a view over the horizon. A dirigible combines both. It can go out and stay at sea for weeks at a time, and it can look over the horizon. And you know what? This is actually an airborne aircraft carrier. It had its own airplanes inside that it would launch, and then they would fly over the horizon looking for more ships.
Now that's fascinating. Inside the Macon were 100 men and airplanes. How many aircraft were in there?
They could carry 4 aircraft inside. They would drop them down on what they called a trapeze, start up the engines, and fly off. And then when they're running out of fuel at the end of their mission, they come back, land on the trapeze, and get hauled back aboard the Macon, just like an aircraft carrier.
Ah, easy for you to say. How did they get? It was a tricky little system.
It was.
Can you explain how they got back onto the aircraft?
Well, you know how they have tail hooks on aircraft that land on aircraft carriers nowadays? They had tail hooks on these airplanes, but they were on top of the airplane, and they would fly the airplane so that the hook would catch the trapeze. Once they were on the trapeze, they'd shut the engine down, lift them into the Macon, move them over into the hangar bay, lower the trapeze down to pick up the next airplane.
Oh my gosh. So what kind of a pilot did you have to be to get your little hook on the bottom of the Macon?
I think the technical word is crazy. Yeah. They had to practice this, and they were very proud of their tradition. As a matter of fact, they created a squadron logo based on the men of the flying trapeze. It was quite an accomplishment.
Now tell me what happened. The Macon was the last airship of its kind,
It was.
correct?
There were 2 dirigibles built, the Akron and the Macon, and they were designed as prototypes to test a new concept in warfare. And unfortunately, both of them ended up crashing and going down in the sea. And that was pretty much the end of the dirigible era back then, although they're experimenting with it again right now.
Now, Greg, we talked about the Macon, and after the Macon crashed, what was going on here at Moffett then?
Well, the Navy had this large airfield here, Naval Air Station Sunnyvale, no more airship, so they didn't want to maintain the air base here. So they traded with the Army. This became Moffett Field Army Air Corps Base, and over the next several years, the Army brought in thousands of soldiers to teach them how to fly and maintain airplanes. A couple of the more famous pilots who received their wings at Moffett Field were Jimmy Stewart and a gentleman by the name of Chuck Yeager, who went on to be the first pilot to break the speed of sound.
Now, there was another change after World War II. Tell us a little about that.
There was. December 7th, 1941, just as they worried about back in the 1920s and 30s, the enemy steamed over the horizon and attacked the United States at Pearl Harbor. So all of a sudden they needed patrol and reconnaissance on the West Coast again. So the Navy took over the base, became Naval Air Station Moffett Field. They had no more dirigibles, so they brought in blimps, and the blimps were dispatched to patrol up and down the West Coast against possible enemy attack.
And as they were patrolling, did they ever see any submarine?
Well, they did, as a matter of fact. I believe it was February 1942, a Japanese submarine actually surfaced off the coast of Santa Barbara and was lobbing artillery shells into our oil fields down there. And Moffett Field dispatched a blimp to get down and chase away the Japanese submarine.
That was a very effective blimp chasing away a submarine.
It worked.
Now, blimps had a pivotal role in the Doolittle raid as well. Can you tell us about that?
Early 1942, our country was still reeling from the attack on Pearl Harbor, and we didn't have much Navy left in the Pacific, but Lieutenant Colonel Doolittle decided we could bomb the Japanese mainland, swing the momentum of the war back to the United States, but the Army bombers couldn't reach Japan. So they put the Army bombers on a Navy aircraft carrier, USS Hornet, which sailed out of Alameda for Japan. About 125 miles outside the Golden Gate, they realized they left some critical equipment behind at Alameda, and that jeopardized the whole mission. So they drove the equipment down to Moffett Field, put it on one of the Navy blimps, blimp number L8, which was dispatched to chase down the Hornet. They lowered the equipment onto the flight deck and they were able to complete the mission.
Now we are in the cockpit of a U.S. Navy P-3 Orion. Now, Greg, this is a Cold War plane, right?
Yes, it is. It's a Lockheed airplane. They first started flying in the early 1960s, and actually they're still flying today, Becca. We've got over 100 of them still flying in the Navy with our Navy, and a lot of other countries fly the P-3 as well.
Now, I know this one has a special tool, the magnetic anomaly detector. Tell us what that is.
MAD, yes. Well, our primary mission is anti-submarine warfare, and that means we have to find the submarines. When a large submarine, which has a lot of metal in it, sails through the water, it'll disrupt the magnetic flow around the Earth, and our magnetic anomaly detector can sense a fluctuation in the magnetic field. When our operator senses that, he gets on the intercom and says, "Mad, mad, mad," and we know that we just flew over our target.
And then you would track this target?
We would. We have maneuvers, we come back around, we track the target, and then depending on the situation, the global situation, if it was peacetime without much hostilities, we'd just keep track of the submarine till our next P-3 came out. We'd turn the submarine over to them and we continue to follow them. But the whole purpose of anti-submarine warfare was to prevent them from launching an attack on the United States or one of our allies. And so if we did get an indication that they were preparing to launch their missiles, then we could open up our bomb bay and we could launch our mines, torpedoes, bombs, whatever we needed to do to stop that submarine and prevent it from launching an attack against the United States.
Very interesting. Did you ever come close?
I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you, Becca.
That's one of those questions we're not to ask.
There you go.
Now, this plane could do more than track submarines. Tell me about search and rescue missions.
Yeah, we had several different missions. Search and rescue is a very important one to us. It's a large airplane. It's got a lot of power, a lot of speed, and we carried a lot of crew members. We have a lot of windows here, and so it's a primary platform for search and rescue. Probably one of our most rewarding missions was off of Mexico one time. There was a 21-foot sailboat that was lost in a drift, and one of the P-3s from our squadron was out there searching for it, and they actually found the sailboat and were able to get a rescue of those people.
That must have been very rewarding.
It was. I wasn't on that flight, but some friends of mine were, and it was one of the most rewarding flights I ever had.
Well, thanks very much for talking to us.
You're welcome.